This is Conspirinormal.
Welcome, guys, back to Conspirinormal. I am here by my lonesome, but Surfiel is working on his project, and I have with me a couple of my favorite people in the paranormal, I guess, podcast YouTube channel world. Jenny Ashford and Tom Ross from the 13 O'Clock podcast. Guys, welcome. Yeah, welcome back to Conspirinormal. It's been far too long.
Yeah, we always have fun on Conspirinormal.
Yeah,
man.
we
love to see you, Adam.
Yeah. I enjoy hanging out with you guys, and Jenny, it was awesome to have you as part of Strange Realities last year. And
yeah, that was super fun. I was so nervous, but it was so fun.
We got to have you on our show one of these days.
Yeah, man. Yeah. We would absolutely love to. I mean, Surfiel would love to hang out as well.
Okay.
I listen to you guys a lot.
Yeah, you were telling me. It's funny.
It's basically like my go-to like show now. If I just kind of want to just like, just listen to the stream of consciousness stuff.
Yeah,
that's what I listen to. It's like I still love Soraya, I still love Strange Familiars, but like 13 O'Clock definitely is of my 3 top podcasts right now that I listen to.
I can't figure out if it's stream of consciousness or stream of bullshit.
Well, both?
Well, you know what? I'm always like checking the length of time on the shows, and I'm always like, okay, they went for 5 hours. I think
we were loaded.
I think the longest that you guys have gone was 6 hours.
I think so.
We might have.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of shows we like kept the stream kept dropping. So we didn't, and we kept getting like more and more inebriated as the night went on. And I kept getting more and more annoyed because I had to keep like restarting the laptop because we kept losing the live stream. And I think when I edited all the audio together, I think it was like 6-something hours.
A lot of times what'll happen is we'll have like a half hour to an hour of just warming up before the show even starts.
Yeah, before we even get into
and that we get complaints on that. Some people are like, could you please put the time of when you're going to talk about it?
Not as many as we used to.
And
I think everyone's kind of down with it now.
I'm like, this is not how this show goes. Okay.
Well, Tom, you typify it as like a 1970s 1970s talk show. It's like Charo would show up, and then Orson Welles comes in, and
Oliver Reed comes in drunk and punches somebody.
Yeah,
everybody's getting loaded.
That's what I grew up with. It was a mixture of 1970s and 1990s Howard Stern.
Hollywood Squares.
Hollywood Squares and shit. It was long form entertainment. You're listening to this shit because you got time to burn up. You're working or you're driving in a truck or something. You know what I mean? There's a reason why you're listening. It's not just for the information. It's because you're doing something else usually.
And that's the thing with me. Like I work a delivery job, so anytime that I'm out working, it's perfect because I could just put it on and like listen, and like 5 hours have gone by, and like my shift is done.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And we don't even, I have notes obviously for the show, and I do kind of get upset when I didn't cover everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. But I don't know. It's just kind of like, I like the tangents. It's more, I like the looser format. And a lot of people seem to like those as well, because especially now that we started doing the live streams, I kind of feel like we get sidetracked more often by people in the comments asking us questions or going off on tangents, and then us having to like.
What's funny is a lot of people aren't seeing it if they're not watching the show live. Going on tangents, that's usually when all the super chats start coming in. So that's a lot of the money comes from our sidetracks.
Yeah.
Because they have to comment on the crazy shit that we were sidetracked on. So I kind of understand it. I know that they want to know about the subject, but that spur of the moment sidetracking and just fucking cutting up, they seem to love that, So I can understand that's the attraction of the show. I mean, if they really want to know about the shit, they can find it out on on Wikipedia.
Well, I mean, the thing about it, I do like to get information in there, but in a lot of ways, I think the information is just kind of like, like a spur for us to discuss
other stuff,
other issues like around it. You know what I mean? So I think it's like kind of the start of a discussion more than just kind of giving out like facts that you can find out.
Yeah, it's not just the facts. We're going to talk about certain possibilities.
I think that I think that you guys are good at doing that, and just like, going off on the tangents, but then also bringing it back in and all this type of thing. And you guys are doing like several different things right now. So, I mean, Jenny, can you kind of take us through, like, because you have the main show that you guys have done since the end of 2016. By the way, I'm a fan since episode 1, by the way. Because I mean, I had you, Jenny, on and Tom, I had you guys on the show like way before.
Not too long after we started it.
And it was well, I had you on before because because I'd heard you on Where Did the Road Go, and I got you on to talk about the Poltergeist book, and then we talked about the true crime books and stuff like that. But like, Jenny, so like you guys do like, I mean, it's like what, 4 or 5 different shows that you guys are basically doing right now, and some of them you're actually doing like live on YouTube, like just like every single week.
Most of them are live.
Yeah. We just because we discovered we liked that better. Other than, so we just started out with the main podcast, which, like I said, we did a lot more kind of paranormal unsolved mysteries, and then kind of went more into true crime, although we're kind of getting back into more unsolved mysteries, creepy disappearances, stuff like that. We do that. That's a live stream, and that's on Friday nights. And then we also do, we do movie reviews, new movies, old movies, whatever we feel like doing. We do several of those a week. I do 2 movie reviews a week. Those are usually recorded, not
book
live.
Reviews.
I do a book review one every week. That's usually recorded, not live. And once a week we do like talking
about food,
like a food show. It's called On the Menu.
On the Menu.
We just started that one not too long ago.
Yeah. Do you like the food? Do you like the food stuff?
I haven't listened to those.
Okay.
I pretty much just noticed that you guys did that today, because you guys post like every day and I can't keep up.
I think we only have 5 of those for right now.
Yeah, we just started it not like a couple weeks ago.
I got a survival angle on them too. Like stuff. These are things that you can make out of shelf stable stuff in case civilization collapses. You can still feed yourself. That's a part of the angle too. Sure. And starting with the very, very basics first.
Of course.
Yeah. And I can't teach that subject just in an hour. I can only show you where to find it, just a quick overview and why you might want to learn it. That's what I'm talking. That's what that show's about. Right. Well, because we cut up. It's funny. It's fun too.
Well, because we went off on food tangents like so many times, like on the regular show. That first we had the idea, well, let's do a cookbook, which is actually almost done.
Yeah, it's almost done. Got to take pictures.
And then you were like, well, why don't we just do like one stream a week instead of doing all the movie reviews that we've been doing? It's like we could do one food show a week. And actually the other day we were thinking about doing a music show too. Yeah. Like maybe switching that out and like doing like an album review or something like that. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. It's like we have so many. It's like as it is now, it's like the only days we don't live stream are Thursdays and Saturdays. And even those days I have other recorded things going on.
And our shows will constantly evolve. They have always evolved. And everybody's shows constantly evolve over time.
Yeah.
Certain lines will be dropped and certain things will be added depending on what the hell's going on at the time.
This is episode 364. I can definitely tell you I have evolved in a lot of different ways since I started this. I've been doing this it's been over 9 years now.
Okay.
Damn, so a lot longer than us then.
Longer than us.
It's been a pretty long time. So, and like, so you guys do the more like kind of more recent movie reviews. And then you guys do like the older movie reviews, which I love a lot of those. And I've gotten like really good suggestions of movies to watch from you guys. So thank you for that. And then Jenny, you're kind of doing some other movies that you're talking about as well, like on your own too.
I started doing that because, I started doing the book reviews because I had a bunch of requests for doing, it's like, why don't you, we want some horror novel reviews and you read a lot of horror. So why don't you do that? And I hadn't read a lot of recent horror fiction. I was like, I should really get back into that. So I bought like $200 worth of books of Amazon, and like then I dug out a bunch of old ones that I had and I started reviewing those. And then I was kind of like, well, shit, I have all of these horror movies too that I want to see that you don't really give a shit about seeing. Yeah. And I was like, why don't I do a couple of those like a week as well?
Yeah.
And just so I can get even more, and people send us movies all the time too. Yeah. That's why we started doing like on the matinee live streams. We used to be really stringent about this has to be like a new movie that only came out like in the past year or two. Because when we first started it, we were going to the theater and we were filming it like, you know, streaming it from the theater. And, you know, we don't do that anymore, obviously. So then we just said, well, we're going to watch new movies on streaming. But then after a while, people kept sending us movies that were only a couple of years old, or maybe like a little bit years, you know, a few years old. And then I was just kind of like, we don't have time to like do all of these movies if we're only doing new ones. So we just decided, screw it. We're just going to do whatever movie we feel like doing on the live streams. And then we still do the movie retrospective, which is recorded once a week, which the patrons vote on.
And we still do whatever. If you send us the movie, we're going to eventually talk about
eventually we'll get to it. Yeah, so it might take a long time. We have a pile.
We got a pile.
That's the other thing. Like people actually are so involved with you guys' show that like they send you guys movies,
Blu-rays. Yeah,
like actually send physical.
Yeah, we have a big pile.
That's because I put my foot down on that shit. Okay, I said if you want me to review a movie, send me the goddamn Blu-ray and I'll do it. I prefer Blu-ray. If you can't afford it, you send me the DVD. I'll do that too because I want my own. I already had a big collection of physical medium. You know what I mean? Or visual media. I'm already kind of loaded.
It's okay. It's okay, Tom. It's right.
You too. Okay.
All right. We're all gonna be.
Yeah, we're drinking Pinnacle whipped cream, vodka, and orange juice.
Is it whipped cream? I didn't think we had
whipped cream. It's also known as a 50-50 bar or a creamsicle.
Tom, you haven't made any caipirinha for
No, not in a while. I don't like caipirinhas that much. I like caipirosca. You know the difference?
No.
Caipirinha is
I was around for that culture for years and I don't know the difference.
Caipirinha is made with cachaça. Caipirosca is made with vodka.
Okay.
And for you guys that don't know anything about Brazil or Brazilian culture,
must be a Sao Paulo thing.
Yeah. Well, cachaça was cheap. Vodka was a little more expensive. All right. And what you do is you take half of a Brazilian lemon, which is green. You take half of that. You put it in the bottom of a bottle, put in a shot or 2 shots, depending on how of vodka, and about 3 teaspoons of sugar, and crush it all together. All right, and then pour ice over it, and that's a caipirosca.
That sounds pretty good, actually.
They're strong and sweet and lemony.
Yeah, just for the audience,
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Tom lived in Brazil for like a couple of years.
I think it was 4 years, but my parents lived there for 12 years, and I kept going back over there to visit them.
Yeah, and you speak fluent Portuguese.
Yeah, I speak Portuguese. Yeah. I grew up in Portuguese, speaking Portuguese.
Yeah, because you went to school there. So
that's like half of my high school. I went to.
That's like Tom and I's bond because like my ex-wife was Brazilian and I've been to Brazil a couple of times. I never lived there. But
it's fun to live there, but you have to accept the limitations of living there. It was an enclosed border, so you really couldn't get anything from the United States. Nothing imported. It was all just Brazilian products. And they were kind of expensive and third rate. A lot of their products, but their food was fantastic.
I agree. Brazil's an interesting place.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. I've been to she was from Goiânia. So I've been there. I've been to Brasilia.
Yeah.
I've been to Natal.
That's out in the middle of nowhere.
Goiânia is pretty much like the Wild West of Brazil. And I've been through Sao Paulo airport and through Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, the big cities are wild, you know what I mean? You can get a lot of trouble there, but you have a lot of fun. The interior of Brazil, where you're talking about, that's also fun. It's a different kind of fun. I liked the south of Brazil too.
Like Rio Grande do Sul and Santa Catarina.
It's kind of like little Germany, you know. I can fit in anywhere in Brazil. you know, I'm a white guy, of course, you know, I mean, they have a lot of white people, even in Sao Paulo, but the more south you go, the kind of like the whiter they go. So the more I just kind of blend in. They wouldn't believe that I was from America. They're like, no, I'm from the United States.
I got a funny story for you. Like, when I was married to her, and the second time that we went to Natal, but you know where that is, right? That's like at the very like tip, like the little nose part of Brazil.
Yeah.
And we went there, and like everybody from Brazil comes there. You know, it's like it's like one of the, it's like that, and like Recife and like those areas. And there was a guy, like, you know, singing on like with the guitar or whatever.
Yeah.
And he calls this dude, like, he's singing to us, and he calls this dude like Norte Americano.
Yeah.
And he was Brazilian, but he was like a red-haired guy, but he was from Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
And like my ex-wife laughs, and she's like, no, he's the American, and pointing at me.
Yeah.
Like, and I would get that actually when I was coming back from that trip, and I was in Sao Paulo. Like, they looked at me as I'm getting on the airplane, and they were asking me for like the Brazilian ID, and they were like speaking to me in Portuguese, and I was like, English. Like, I understood a little bit of Portuguese, but there's all these, and he was like, yeah, go ahead. It's like, they thought I was Brazilian. Like,
that's funny because you know, like, you come to the United States and they think anything in South America must be like Mexico.
Yeah.
And like, no.
The people in Natal are like darker skinned people, like black hair.
They have
that part of the country.
You keep going south, though, they just get whiter and whiter and whiter.
Yeah.
The more down to you're in Germany.
Until
the more European, the more European immigration is Sao Paulo, and like Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul and those states. And I know there's actually a listener to Conspirinormal that actually lives there.
Yeah.
And
well, you start getting down to like Uruguay, Paraguay, places in Argentina and in Chile. And you start seeing names like McHenry and stuff. Mick names, lots and lots of Irish immigration.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of
Chile
Americans
has a lot of. Santiago was like significantly Irish. I mean, significantly, like 30% Irish.
A lot of
people don't realize it.
A lot of Americans don't realize that about like the southern part of Brazil and Argentina and Chile. I think one of the Argentine liberators, his name was O'Higgins. Okay?
O'Higgins,
So, you know,
they don't understand it.
Right.
And then
like Irish people that had immigrated to the southern part of South America, and spoke Spanish.
And then when General Lee and all the Confederate generals, when they fled the United States after the Civil War, they all went to the south of Brazil.
Yeah, there's the
down there. Yeah,
in Brazil, there's the Os Confederados.
Yeah,
I'm trying to pronounce that to impress you.
I don't remember. I don't remember. The Confederates. Yeah,
like they there were actually Confederate, Confederate soldiers or whatever that actually after the Civil War immigrated to Brazil. So a lot of people don't know that history.
Yeah, they still speak English down there. They got a real strong Southern accent.
Yeah,
they're like on a reservation. They're treated kind of like Indians.
And I knew Brazilian.
They're like protected.
I knew a Brazilian guy named Washington.
Yeah,
my ex's brother was named Wellington. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, it isn't quite as cut and dry as like Americans think that it is.
Yeah, they think everything's Mexico.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Well, it's just like anywhere else. If you've never been there, it just seems like, well, you see everything is like homogenous.
Yeah,
because you've never been. But particularly, the U.S., which is so kind of touted for being like, oh, the immigration, everybody immigrates here, but people immigrate other places too, and have done for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, and most of the Japanese that left Japan are in Brazil. They're in a place called Liberdade.
The largest population of Japanese people outside of Japan is Sao Paulo.
Is in Brazil. Yeah. It's a neighborhood called Liberdade. Yeah.
It's
and they dance samba. You can go on Facebook. You can go on YouTube, and you just go Brazilian Japanese girls samba carnival dancing, and you'll see them. They got all these little Japanese girls out there dressed up in the carnival outfits, booties hanging out, dancing like any other Brazilian girl.
There was a Japanese soldier, one of the guys that actually he was one of these guys that was in the Philippines that didn't believe the war was over.
Yeah, there's three of them.
They didn't get him out until like 1967.
Yeah.
He went back to Japan and he just could not live there.
Yeah.
It was just so different from what he was used to. So he ended up immigrating to Brazil and he lived there.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's just like, it's so funny to think about. I mean, funny, odd, because like I said, people don't, I guess they don't really consider that, like, just people have been moving around for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Brazil is another version of the United States. It's just it's in a parallel universe.
I agree with that.
Parallel universe, United States.
Jenny, would you ever go?
I would like to go. I don't know if, I've never been, so I don't know if I could live there. I could live anywhere.
I wouldn't go now. I'm
going to, no, but I'm going to tell you, like, when you go, like, your culture shock is going to be through the roof. I thought I could deal with it, but like, I was like totally shocked by the way that it is down there.
My friends all the girls I grew up with all live here in Florida now.
Yeah, Orlando actually has a large Brazilian population.
Yeah, because their families evacuated them. It got worse and worse as time went on. And evidently it's a lot like Colombia right now. Lots and lots of violent crime, and the economy's just trashed.
Yeah.
Totally trashed.
There was one time that I went with her to this like black marketplace in the middle of Guyana. And she looks at me and she's like, do not speak English here.
Yeah.
Do not open your mouth.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, and she was like deadly serious because like you could get kidnapped.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I'd go back just because the economy's so bad right now. I say it's pretty dangerous right now. Yeah. It's not the same Brazil I grew up in.
Yeah, because I mean, that was a while back.
That was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you were there, Tom, like right at the end of the military dictatorship, right?
Yeah. But all my friends who are still there said that was the heyday of Brazil. They loved it. We all had a great time.
Yeah.
The military dictatorship, when you say military dictatorship in the United States, that has bad connotations, but they had a good dictatorship. The reason why the dictatorship happened is because their politicians were so fucked up. They were just robbing the country blind. Nothing got done. The military dictatorship was not violent, and it built all the roads. It achieved everything that Brazil's known for. The dictatorship did that. Democracy can't work in Brazil. No, their culture is just not set up for that.
Yeah, that was the period between 1964 and 1985.
Yeah.
When they transferred, there was the coup in 64. Yeah. And then they transferred to a civilian government in 85. Yeah.
And then all the thievery started again. And yeah, the military stole, but they didn't steal as much as the civilians did.
Yeah. Corruption is like incredibly endemic.
Yeah. Right.
Well, it's from my understanding, it's mostly just kind of like understood. Everyone's just kind of like, well, that's the way shit works there.
Yeah. Everything is bribery and everything is just, double dealing, and it's like ancient Rome.
Yeah. Brazilians, I love them. I do, but like they could be some of the worst people to each other.
They're dishonest too, very dishonest. Yeah. Americans say things about America that I just fucking laugh because they don't understand how bad human nature can get, Brazilians are good people, but they're ruthless. And very, very selfish.
I was married to one, Tom. I know.
Yeah. They're very much like for you American nerds who like Star Trek. Brazil is the United States in the mirror universe.
Uh-huh.
With evil Spock and and all. It's the mirror universe.
Right. They're always trying to like one up each other.
Games upon games, and it's like ancient Rome. It's like it's just
Yeah, they are. They're like, I've actually thought about that. Like, they are the Romans.
Yeah.
Like, even down to the names.
Yes. It's like Spartacus. Did you ever see the series?
I was going to say, I think that's
that.
why you like the show Spartacus so much.
I grew up here.
Because it's just familiar.
Lie, cheat, steal, murder. Yeah, this is how it is.
That was a good episode.
What age were you? What ages were you?
I guess I was about 13, between 13 and 17, I guess.
Okay, that's pretty formative. That's a pretty formative age to be down there.
Yeah, and it's not a zero trust society, but it's a low trust society. And it's honor based.
I've heard that the driving down there is horrifying.
Yeah.
I have this great book. It's called Traffic, and it's about driving customs all over the world.
Yeah.
And I particularly remember, I should probably read it to you. I particularly remember the chapter that was about Brazil, because they were just talking about why do we even have like traffic rules? Because nobody follows them, really. They just kind of do whatever the hell they want to do.
It's not a zero trust society, but it is a low trust society. It is not based in laws. The laws are just window dressing bullshit. All right. It's based in honor, very much like a mafia. Just because something is illegal doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you're going to have to bribe somebody to get it done. And that's how it's called jeitinho, the little way. There's a little way to do something. Jeitinho, jeitinho. There's got to be a little way. Like machine guns. You can't have machine guns. But if you bribe the right guy, then you can have a machine gun. You can have a machine gun.
You can do whatever you want as long as you grease the right
you got to grease the right problem. Right. Sure. And that's just the way everything is. Yeah, you can't kill somebody, but you can.
There's ways
you can.
When I got off, Jenny, when I got out of the airport, and like Goiânia is not Sao Paulo, it is not Rio, it is a city of probably about 1 million people. Okay, so it's fairly small in Brazilian scale. And when I got out of the airport, we get in the taxi, and this taxi is going. I was white knuckling that son of a bitch all the way to the hotel.
Yeah.
Every
was
American talks about that.
Scary.
I would probably be horrified. Well, I can't. Well, hell, man, it's like we drive on I-4 in Orlando, and I can't even take that because everyone down here drives like a crazy person.
Yeah, it's funny. Every American mentions the driving there and like the taxis, and I just, it doesn't even faze me. I don't even realize it. This is the way it was. That's the way I grew up with that, and it's funny that never stood out to me.
Yeah, but like I said, it is even as much as people complain about, and it's not everywhere in the U.S. obviously, but in Florida, because we have so many people here that are from other places, bringing their own driving customs from other places to Central Florida, like with all the tourists and all the people that have moved here and stuff. So everyone so you're kind of taking your life in your hands a little bit.
Well.
No, this is nothing compared to Brazil.
But
nothing.
That's me reading about Brazilian traffic and stuff like that. I'm like, that's nothing like.
It's real twisty roads, very high speeds, shitty cars usually, and
motorcycles weaving in and out.
And
I don't know how it is in Sao Paulo and Rio, but in Goiânia is a planned city, so there's like a ton of roundabouts. Everywhere.
Traffic circles.
And these little scooters are just like, and then you got some guy that's like, pulling this cart with like vultures all over it.
Oh my God.
I had fun there though.
I'm telling you.
I can see like why you growing up there, like you said, during your formative years.
Yeah.
I can see why you're the way you are.
Yeah. You're not supposed to do this shit, but you can. You're not supposed to, but you can.
Tom grew up in the mirror universe.
Yeah.
It's
a good way to put it. I grew up in the mirror universe.
It's a crazy place, but I'm going to tell you, it's also a really beautiful place too.
Yeah.
Like
the best natural resources in the world.
You can literally walk outside and there's a mango tree, like just full of mangoes. I mean, that's
amazing.
It's a very beautiful place. Also, by the way, Goiânia Tom, I'm gonna see if you know this. Guyana, where my ex is from, was the site of the largest radioactive disaster in the Western Hemisphere.
I didn't know about that. When was that?
1988.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to look that up. Maybe we can do a show about that.
Oh, well, it's called.
Oh, you know why I didn't know about that? I wasn't there at that time.
So what happened was there was like, so all these guys like looking for scrap metal, and there was an old hospital that had closed. Okay. And there was like this literally Soviet era, because it was from the Soviet Union, X-ray machine that these two guys broke open, and they pulled out this blue substance that was like cesium or strontium, something that's like really highly fucking radioactive. Okay. And they took it home.
Yeah.
And like the little kids were playing with it. And like one of the guys was like painting his chest with it.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And like so then everybody, of course, gets radiation poisoning and starts dying.
Yeah.
And there was a few people that did, but like the Brazilian government had to go in there and just like close it down and like bulldoze the whole entire section.
Damn.
And whenever I was there in 2007, whenever I was there, my ex-wife was like, we were in the taxi and she's like, you remember what I was talking to you about the nuclear disaster? She was like, that's where it was. And they were like building a mall over it.
Yeah.
Oh man. See, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah.
I think that we haven't done any shows about that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's considered the greatest radioactive disaster in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow. See, I didn't know anything about that.
Just from a couple of dudes breaking open a X-ray machine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, don't those guys feel bad? Wait, they're dead, right? Did they die?
I'm not. I'd have to go back and look at it. There's a Wikipedia article that you can find about it.
Oh my God.
I'll shoot it over to you. But
see, I'm finding out new stuff like that all the time.
I know that there were a few. It wasn't like massive amount of people.
Yeah.
But it was just enough to contaminate the area. So
well, I think and the thing that's kind of maybe notable about it is that it was just a couple of dudes being like, "Hey, we're gonna steal some shit." You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, some extra.
Like Chernobyl was the biggest in the world,
right?
Okay, and then you had something before that. You had like 3 Mile Island.
Yeah, remember that?
That was like, but it didn't actually melt down. Yeah. So because of that, the Guyana incident, I think is what it's called, is considered the largest nuclear event in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think we got the show warmed up. Let's go ahead.
I knew there was something wrong with my ex-wife.
Yeah.
Well, that explains it right there.
Exactly.
What's the first topic you want to get on, bro?
All right, so let's get on to let's get off Brazil.
Yeah.
I do love talking to you about it, Tom, because
the audience probably snoring.
Yeah. Except for that one guy that lives in Brazil.
Yeah. That one guy is like really, really
that one guy lived in Brazil. Oh, yeah.
Well, here's one I don't think we've talked about, Jenny. Maybe we have. I don't think we have. The Sodder Children disappearance.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah,
one.
I wrote about it in my book, and it's like I was amazed that when I looked back through all of our episodes, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that we didn't actually do a show about that.
Yeah.
And I had put it in the Patreon poll a bunch of times, but it had lost. But then finally, it's weird. I keep putting like the same topics in the Patreon polls, and it's weird which ones. I think, we don't have that many patrons, so it's interesting how some of them nobody votes for it for like the first 3 times, but then everybody votes for it like the 4th time I put it in there. But for whatever reason, everybody picked that one. Yeah, so that was like that happened back in the 40s, and it's one of those cases where they don't actually know if the kids died in the fire or if they were kidnapped and they lived out their lives somewhere else. You remember that one, right?
Yeah, I remember that one. I think they died in the fire.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I could go either way on that.
I remembered the show, and I remembered based on what you told me that I think that they died in the fire, and it was a real bad investigation. They didn't go through they didn't go through the ashes and the debris of that house very well. It was a long time ago.
Now, I do kind of feel
depends
like,
on who did the investigation. You know
and
what I mean?
plus, I do kind of feel like, I do definitely feel like there was some kind of, I mean, I do think the fire was deliberately set for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
they were supposed to be in the top floor, right?
Yeah, it happened on Christmas Eve, and it was this family, and you know, they were Italian immigrants.
Yeah.
This was in Pennsylvania.
Was it? It was like, I feel like it was somewhere like that, or West Virginia or somewhere like that.
It is. It's West Virginia. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was West Virginia. And you know, they were kind of George Sodder was kind of like, he owned a trucking company, I think. And he had a bunch of kids, him and his wife. And they were kind of, you know, upper middle class. And they had all these kids. One of them was away in the military, but the other kids were home. And it was Christmas Eve. And they had been getting, I guess, like all this weird stuff had happened to them prior, but they didn't really think about it at the time. So it's Christmas Eve, like some of the kids were at home and they wanted to stay up late because they're like, oh, can we open some of our presents and we'll stay down here or whatever. And then, so the parents go up to bed, some of the other kids go up to bed, and then the mom gets woken up by a phone call in the middle of the night, which was kind of a weird phone call that was like some woman asking for somebody that wasn't there. I don't know if that had anything to do with what happened subsequently, but it woke her up. And then while she was awake, she noticed that the kids weren't downstairs anymore. So she presumed that they had gone upstairs to bed because their rooms were like, there were two rooms like up on the attic level or, you know, upstairs. And she didn't really think about it. But then she was kind of like, man, they left the door unlocked and they left all the lights on and all this other shit. Like I told them like not to do that. So she just kind of went around and did that and then tried to go back to bed. But then she heard something and she said it sounded like something hitting the roof and rolling down the slope of the roof. And she didn't think about it. Like I said, at the time, maybe she just thought it was a rock or whatever. And then she goes back to sleep. But then like half an hour later, she wakes up and she smells smoke. And the house is on fire.
Might have been a Molotov cocktail.
I kind of feel like it was because they did have some witnesses after that said that they saw somebody throwing what looked like Molotov cocktails at the house. And the house burned down in, I think, with 45 minutes. And there wasn't hardly anything left of the house, right?
That's really quick.
Yeah, the phone line had been cut. There was other weird shit like, you know, they got some of the kids out of the house, but then they're outside. And then George, the dad, is like, hey, you know, where are the other kids? They must still be up in their room. He's like, well, I have a ladder. It's always, you know, propped up against the side of the house, you know, so I can climb up and get them. And then he goes around to the side of the house and the ladder isn't there. And he's like, okay, well, that's not right because the ladder's always there. So he tried to kind of climb up the side of the house and like break the window and cut his arm open, but they couldn't get the kids out and the house just completely burned down. They actually got to a neighbor's house because their phone line had been cut. They got to a neighbor's house, called the fire department, but the fire chief was like, well, I'm the only one here because it's Christmas Eve and I don't know how to drive the fire truck, which I'm like, okay, dude, whatever. And we have to wait until somebody comes in that knows how to drive the fire truck. So by the time the fire truck got there, it was like 2 or 3 hours later. It was like 8:30 in the morning, right? And the house had already burned down at that point. And so the parents assumed, well, you know, 5 of our kids are dead, like they were all in the fire. And that's what they thought for a couple of days. I mean, so much so that a few days after the fire, George was like so upset that he's like, you know what, I'm just bulldozing this whole land and I'm going to build a memorial to the 5 kids on the property. But then the more they thought about it, the more they were like, you know, when they did the investigation, they didn't find any remains, which seems a little weird. I mean, 5 kids, yes, you know, it was presumably like a really hot fire, but, you know, the mom starts researching and she's like, you know, I've talked to a bunch of, you know, people that worked in crematoriums and stuff. And they're like, to burn a body, fire has to be like 2000 degrees for like 2 hours, right? Like to burn the body down to, and there's still bones left. Even at that point, they have to crush them up, like to make the cremains.
There's going to be a lot of factors though, man.
Well, that's the thing. And it's just kind of like, and then like later on, there were all these other witness statements that said, oh, we saw a car like leaving from the thing that's had the kids in the back. There was the whole thing about the ladder being moved. They found it in a ditch later on. Neither of his trucks would start because he thought, he had like a trucking business, and he had 2 trucks. And he's like, oh, I can, pull the truck up under the window when the fire was still going, and I could climb up onto it and get to the window. And neither of the trucks would start, even though they'd been working the day before. So I definitely think whether or not the kids were in the fire or not, I think that's a separate question to whether the fire was deliberately set, because I totally think the fire was deliberately set.
Right.
There's a lot of factors with this, okay?
Yeah.
The kids were pretty small, some of them. They were on the top floor. There's better ventilation for a fire on the top floor. It can get hotter up there. And there's things that we don't know. Were the windows open on the bottom floor? What was the house actually made of? Where was the stairwell? Because if windows are open and the fire's in a certain place and the stairwell's in the right place, you get good ventilation. It ends up being like a bellows to where to get it really hot upstairs. And yeah, maybe it wouldn't totally reduce a body down to absolutely nothing. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe bones did survive. Maybe the problem is in the arson investigation. Maybe they just didn't look hard enough for the bones. Maybe the guys who were running the investigation were fucked up. There's a lot of things we just don't know.
Maybe they didn't want to find them, or maybe they did kind of find them and then just kind of like kicked them under the.
So do you think they just got like emulated like completely, and there were really no?
There's no way of knowing because it was a long time ago. We don't have all the details.
And I think too that some of the people, like even the dude that was investigating the fire, he was on like the coroner's jury when they were doing the investigation. He might have been one of the guys, because there was all these kind of threats against George Sodder in particular. Yeah. And they were thinking that maybe it had something to do with, because George Sodder was very well known in the Italian-American community in that town, and for being really anti-Mussolini. And it could have, and there was a very pro-Mussolini faction in the Italian-American community also. And George, from everything that I've read, didn't seem all that shy about sharing his views about it. And he had gotten threats about that before. So I kind of feel like maybe somebody, I don't even know if they intended to kill the kids or anything. They just wanted to burn his house down.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It seems to me, I could go either way on it. I kind of like what would have been the purpose of kidnapping the kids though?
See, that's a problem. And
like, what would they have done with them?
How many of them were there again?
Five of them.
How hard would it be to get 5 kids out of a house all together and spirit them away without being noticed, without making noise? It's more likely that a fire started in the house, probably on purpose. The kids were killed in the fire, and for some reason or another, the bones were not found. They're probably there, but they weren't found.
It's so strange that you've got like this weird like grudge that like follows from the old country. And it's playing out in like this little town in West Virginia.
That's the story of history, though.
Yeah,
those old grudges between England and Ireland and Scotland and Germany were happening here in the United States. It's still, in a way, kind of going on.
Yeah, if you've seen Gangs of New York, I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was a great movie.
The Civil War, we call it a civil war, but it's actually the war between the states. There was a lot of ethnic component to that. The northern people were more Anglo-Saxon. The southern people were more Celtic and Teutonic. So there was stuff that went back to the old country. That was part of it.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why the Southerners were always treated as second class.
It translated.
They were Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah. They tended to be Irish, and the Northeast tended to be Anglo.
Weren't there sightings of the kids?
There were several sightings later. There was this one waitress in a diner, and she said that she saw 5 kids and she recognized them from the photos, because obviously once the parents figured out, hey, there were no bodies found in the rubbish or whatever in the ruins, they had pictures of all their kids and they had billboards and all this other stuff. And this waitress came forward and said she didn't really think about it at the time, but she's like, yeah, I saw these 5 kids with these, I think it was 2 or 3 people, like I think it was 2 dudes and like a woman or whatever, and that she had seen them having breakfast in the restaurant where she worked. She said the car had Florida plates, but I don't know. And like I said, there was a thing later where I don't remember how many years later it was, but somebody sent them a photograph of Louis Sodder, who was supposed to be one of the older kids. He was like a teenager. And obviously it's, back then they couldn't determine if it was really him or not, but it did look like him, I gotta say. And the weird thing about it is that, that missing people website, like the Charlie Project or whatever, they still have a listing for Louis Sodder. I don't think they have listings for the other kids though, but for him in particular, I guess just because of that one photograph that somebody sent that actually did kind of look like him. But sadly, like George and Jenny Sodder are both dead, at this point, and they never did find out what happened to their kids. And then the kids that survived, because one of the kids that survived, I think she was only 3 when the house burned down. I think her name was Sylvia. And, so the kids kind of carried it on, but they still don't know what happened to them. I mean, I agree with you that it's probably slightly more likely that they just died in the fire and either the investigation was bungled accidentally on purpose, whatever.
I think it's most likely.
I mean, like I said, this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was in the 40s. And, so they probably weren't as stringent as they needed to be, or maybe they didn't like this family. So they were just like, whatever, fuck it.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was.
So, so they didn't worry too much about it. It
was something that if you were there and saw it happen, it would be mysterious.
Well, that's true. That's true with any unsolved mystery.
Bitches did burn up, and that dude who's doing the investigation doesn't give a shit. That's probably what most likely.
It seems like with a lot of these cases that you always have this, like, you have that likely scenario. And we talked about, I think there was another case, I think in like Philadelphia, where this like lady disappeared, and then you had all these sightings of her after.
Yeah.
And she eventually turns up, I think, dead in North Carolina. But like in this case and several others, you always have that. You always have this weird, like, okay, it seems likely that these kids probably burned up in the fire and there was no time for them to get out. But then you just have these weird sightings that happen afterwards. And like, I don't really know how to explain that, whether that's some kind of wishful thinking or whether that's some kind of mass hysteria.
Yeah, it's hard to say because, I mean, it has happened. I mean, most of the time, I don't know what the percentage is, but, the majority of the time, if somebody gets taken, if somebody gets kidnapped, for example,
right.
By a stranger, they're usually going to wind up dead, but not always. So there's always the possibility that, I mean, we even talked about, I think we were talking about the cruise ship crimes on, the last time, and we were talking about Amy Lynn Bradley, who disappeared off a cruise ship that, she was on a cruise with her family. And then there were some photos of her that turned up later kind of on, or maybe they were of her. They turned up later on some, escort site, like in Aruba or somewhere.
Right.
And, people do get kidnapped for sex trafficking. It does happen. So it's not impossible. And I think that's why it's really hard to just discount people's sightings of them afterward, because it's possible that it could happen. I think it's less likely. It's more likely if somebody gets taken, they're usually going to get, I mean, if it's a woman, they're usually going to get raped and murdered. I mean,
or a child.
Yeah. Or a child. They're usually going to get raped and murdered, sadly. But
well, actually, I don't know what the statistics are now, but I do remember reading that if a child was taken and is missing, if you can't find them within a couple hours, chances are they're going to be dead. But most of them that are taken are found within a couple hours and they're alive.
Yeah, I think it's like 72 hours or something they say.
Yeah.
Because what happens a lot is that a pervert will abduct one, mess around with one, and then let the kid go because they actually like the kids. They're pedophiles. They don't hate the kids. They love the kid. So they just try to do with their little molestation and they let the kid go. But if they don't let the kid go, if you don't find the kid within a couple, you said 72 hours, then
that's usually
yeah.
And that kid's dead.
Any missing person within 72 hours. Yeah, that's your window.
Yeah,
I mean, you can assume.
Evidently, most of them are abducted, molested, and let go within hours, like 3 hours.
Well, it's at random. Yeah. Like I was waiting for you to come back from a walk or whatever, and I was watching an old episode of Cold Case Files because I love that show. That's like it's weird, but it's like a relaxing thing for me to watch. So I was watching an old one. It's
that narration, you know.
It is. It's like I don't know.
And there was a human head inside the refrigerator.
Yeah, it's just kind of, I don't know. He wonders how I can watch true crime shit all the time and like read about it.
It makes it a downer to me. Yeah.
It is, but it's like, I don't know. I find it interesting and it's also kind of, I don't know. It's not comforting. That's
you're not alone, Jenny. I find it interesting too. So
yeah. But I was just watching this one and I can't remember where it took place, but this little girl, she was taken, it was 1974, and I think she was 12 or 13 years old. And the sad thing, she had been at like a public pool or something with her brother, and he made her mad. Like he did a cannonball and got her all wet. And she was like, man, screw you, bro. And she was walking back to their house, which was only like a block or two away. And he saw her and then leaving. And then 2 minutes later, she just disappeared. And they found her body like 6 months later. I think it was 6 months later, they found her skull like in a field, like 9 miles away. And they pretty much knew who did it. It was she had walked by this, it was a high school or an elementary school or something. And there was a janitor that had worked there. And he was pretty much, they determined that he was the only dude that had been there, that had been seen in the area, that could have taken her in that window, right? Like, you know, when between where her brother saw her and between where she disappeared. So they figured it was probably him, but they didn't have enough evidence. So he basically walked. But then many years later, somebody came forward when, you know, a new investigator came in and opened up the cold case file and kind of tried to republicize it. This girl or this woman came forward and said, oh my God, I think that's the same dude that molested me back in the 70s. And he was a janitor at that school. He basically chloroformed her and took her into the school, molested her. She kept waking up because I guess he didn't give her enough chloroform.
Well, so she, off.
Yeah, it's not a real, I mean, if you're ever thinking of, please don't chloroform somebody, but you know, that shouldn't need to be said.
It only puts you down for a couple minutes.
It doesn't work the way it works in the movies. Yeah. You know, in the movies, they're like, oh, they put it over their mouth and they knock them out right away. But it doesn't work like that. Like you
Public
keep
service
you have
announcement,
to keep,
do not do this.
Yeah. I'm just saying, don't do this. I'm just saying it doesn't work like it does in the movies. Like if you don't continuously give them chloroform, they'll just keep waking up. It doesn't like knock people out for hours and hours. So this girl kept waking up and she came forward and she's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the same dude that did the same thing to me, but she got let go.
Yeah.
So I guess he had been like escalating.
Right.
Because, and then another girl came forward and said, oh my God, I think that dude did the same thing to me, like back in the day. And so they eventually ended up getting, I think it was like in the mid 2000s sometimes, because when they questioned this dude, they opened up the trunk of his car. In the trunk of his car was 2 bottles of chloroform, which super sketchy, knives, duct tape, like all this other kind of stuff.
Rape kit.
He had like a whole abduction kit. Yeah, and the cops at the time said that. They're like, this is essentially an abduction kit. But other than him being the only dude that was kind of in the area, they didn't have any other physical evidence because it was the 70s. You know, so they were like, well, we can't really hold him on that because the DA was just like, yeah, we don't have enough evidence. We can't get a conviction. So he's like, just forget it. So they didn't end up getting him until like way later on, but he had done it before. As far as they know, this little girl that he killed was maybe the first one that he killed. Right. Although I kind of doubt that. I kind of feel like he had maybe done it before and they just didn't catch him. Because that's not something that just comes out of nowhere. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
How many of these stories like start like end with just, well, we couldn't catch him because it was the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, people forget it's like the 70s. They didn't have DNA. They didn't have anything like that. And the thing about it is that even if he has a trunk full of chloroform, That's, obviously that's really suspicious, but it's not illegal.
You have to have not evidence. Illegal. You have to be able to nail a guy.
He said that he had the chloroform. He stole it from the high school because he used it to get high. That's what he said. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's bullshit, but they couldn't prove it. So, until much later when other people came forward and fingered him, for doing the same kind of shit, but just letting them go.
Right.
So I think that he got to a point, when they caught him or when they arrested him, he also had a bunch of scratches all over. So I think what might have happened was that he kidnapped this one girl, took her into the school, and she fought him like hell. Yeah. And he ended up killing her because she fought him, maybe. Yeah. So I kind of feel like that's what happened. And then he just drove her into the field and like dumped her there, sadly. Mm-hmm. But, it was just like a sad... It's just funny that you're talking about that because I just watched that on Cold Case Files like last night or something.
Well, let's talk about. I want to talk about DB Cooper.
Okay, Cooper. Yeah,
this is one of the I think one of the best mysteries. Did you guys happen? Because I listened to you guys' episode on this. Did you guys happen to catch the HBO documentary?
No.
I don't think we did actually.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so some of the I think some, if not all, of the suspects that you guys covered in that episode were also covered in the DB Cooper.
Yeah.
Well, Jenny does her research, man. She can dig out some good shit. Bro.
And honestly, in that documentary, you're just left totally guessing as to which of the four. I think there's four people that they talk about. Which of the four could it have been? Because it honestly could have just been any of the four.
That's kind of what I came across too, because they were kind of like, well, this guy's more likely than that guy. I'm like, they all sound kind of likely though, of being the guy that could have done it. Although I suspect that he probably died. Although the weird thing about it is that where did all the rest of the money go is what I think is weird. Because I mean, the 50, what was it? $5,800 of it that they found. And some of it looked like it had been buried by a person. Now it wasn't necessarily him that buried it though. I mean, somebody else could have buried it at some other point.
Look, out of the four suspects that you're talking about, right? I don't remember which one of them was most likely Airborne Army. How many of them were there?
Okay, so I lean towards the guy that on his deathbed told his then wife that he was DB Cooper. I lean towards him, and the reason I lean towards him is because the money that was found, they went to that area, and it almost seems like he dropped the money there and said that it almost seems like he had dropped the money. He had the money with him. He dropped it there. And later on, that kid finds it.
Yeah.
So he told the kid where to find it?
No. Okay. It was just random. He did it purposely. He had the money with him. He dropped it just to throw whoever off the trail.
I don't remember which guy that is he's talking
They never
about.
did.
Which guy was that?
I'm not sure you guys actually covered him.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we might not have. I can't remember all their names.
You did cover the guy that the trans guy, the one that was became a woman later on.
Yeah, that's
and then there was the other one where the lady said that it was her uncle. You guys covered that one. I don't think you covered the one where it was the guy told his wife I was DB Cooper on his deathbed, and he was ex-military.
Okay, this is what I was saying. He has to be ex-military, ex-airborne, probably.
Right. Okay. World War II vet. He would have had to have been.
He has to be a hardcore motherfucker that is totally comfortable jumping out of an airplane that he's never jumped out of before. But he has jumped before. You know what I mean? He's not afraid of jumping. He's not afraid of Halo, which is high altitude, low opening fucking parachute jump. Okay. Now, a guy from the 82nd who's just done a standard jump, that's not halo, it's just a regular old jump, okay? As soon as you jump out, it pulls the cord for you. That's enough, okay? If he can do that, then he can do halo, all right?
How many feet is that?
It's still thousands of feet.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly low altitude. Now, one thing about it, like I said, the guy had to know because he specifically chose that particular plane because he knew that it was the easiest to jump out of because the hatch that you would jump out of was the farthest away from the engines and
So I'm thinking that in that era, okay, this is before what do you call it? This is before recreational para jumping, okay? This is before guys paid to go out and jump.
Right.
You're talking about a dude who's military. You're talking about a guy who has balls. He will jump out of a fucking airplane. Even if he's never jumped out of that type of airplane, he would know what questions to ask. I need a ramp where I can get a clear exit. All right. I need to have I'll pull the ripcord myself. I don't need to hook up to jump, that kind of stuff.
Well, he asked them for 4 parachutes too, but he only took 2 of them though.
So this isn't his first jump. Okay. He also has to be comfortable jumping in the dark and landing in the wild in the dark. And he has to have the confidence that he can get out of there on regular infantry style land navigation skills.
Because on D-Day, didn't they drop those guys like in the early morning?
Yes, they did. They dropped them in random fucking places where they didn't plan because they were getting shot at. A lot of them landed in the water, got drowned. Some of them landed on top of German machine gun nests and got fucking shot to pieces on their way down. It was somebody who was not afraid to jump into unknown conditions because they felt that they had the skills to get themselves out of there on foot.
Because he jumped out. I mean, he must have had a plan, obviously.
He had some kind of plan. Yeah.
It seemed like he wasn't real concerned about where he was going to land because the plane like rerouted a couple of times because the pilot was like, hey, we can't fly to where you're saying, because he wanted to go somewhere in Mexico or something like that. And he's like, we don't have enough fuel. And so they had to circle around a few times. And so I don't think, I mean, he jumped out like maybe somewhere he didn't plan. Maybe he had a bunch of plans ahead of time.
I don't think it was a plan per se. It was a general concept.
Yeah.
He had confidence that no matter where he jumped, that he would be able to walk his way to a place where he could get to civilization.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, this is somebody who has infantry skills.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you'd have to pull off something like that
at night, so he can walk at night and get himself back out of the woods and back to a road. He knows, any infantryman knows that if you walk long enough inside the continental United States, you will eventually hit a road.
Even in the Pacific Northwest.
Exactly. Yeah. You will eventually hit a road. Just walk in the same direction until you hit a road. Once you hit a road, you will find your way back to civilization. So he knows that.
So do you think he was a vet of probably World War II or Korea?
Yeah.
I kind of he must have been.
Or the Army, Airborne Army. Could have been peacetime, but in that era.
Yeah.
Because some guys only served 2 years. And I'm going to say 82nd Airborne Division or 75th Infantry, which is Ranger, Airborne Ranger. Possibly, maybe some of the Air Force units.
Well, Jenny, wasn't the original plan to take the plane to Mexico?
Yeah, he wanted it. Well, that's what he asked them at first. And then the pilot was like, well, we don't have enough fuel to do that. So then kind of him and the pilot sort of conferred. He's like, well, we can go here and get more fuel and do this and that and the other thing. So like I said, I don't think he had a particular plan as to like, oh, I have to jump out here. He didn't have anybody waiting for him, obviously. But like you said, he probably had confidence that, oh, wherever I jump out, I'll be able to find my way back to. If he made it, I don't know. Right. The only thing that makes me think that maybe he didn't, I mean, some people did say later that it's like, oh, I picked up a guy that kind of looked like that and took him to this diner or whatever. But I kind of feel like, I don't know, the fact that none of the money, because they had all the serial numbers of all the money that they gave him. And the fact that none of that was ever spent that they know of, is a little weird.
Yeah, that's very strange. I think he died.
I mean, and the thing is, if he jumped out and died in the wilderness somewhere, I mean, no one would ever find him.
If he did live, he lost the money.
Well, Mexico would have probably have been a better place to jump out.
Yeah. Because you could buy your way out of Mexico.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know why, like, he chose to jump out in that particular spot. Like, because all the pilot said was, we just have to refuel before we go to Mexico. And then presumably they would have taken him to Mexico.
Mexico would have been,
because he said he had a bomb.
Mexico would have been a little easier because it was still the same rules. Just keep walking in the same direction until you find a road. Well, follow that road one way or another, and you will find civilization.
Well, jumping over.
Now you got US dollars. But with US dollars, you can do whatever you need to do right there in Mexico. And then you could let the situation cool down. You could live in Mexico for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and not spend any money during that time.
And I don't think there was any real extradition. But I think also from a logistical point of view, wouldn't have jumping out over a desert been a lot easier than jumping over like serious forest canopy?
Yes and no. You jump over forest, the danger is getting hung up in a tree and getting hit and getting your shit busted up on limbs coming down. Now, if you can make it down to the ground, okay, without being totally busted up, you're gold. You're good. You can even keep some of that chute as a blanket if it gets too cold, and you can wrap up in that to spend the night in warmth. So forest, once you're on the ground, is a lot more hospitable because there's a lot more water. The temperature range is a lot better. You got shade. Landing in desert is very easy because you're not going to hit any trees. The problem there is water and sunlight.
Yeah.
If you're out in the middle of fucking nowhere and you don't have any water, yeah, you'll eventually find a road, but that might be a 4-day walk. Well, guess what? You might die of dehydration in that 4 days that you're walking.
So my theory, he jumped out, he was okay, but then he encountered Bigfoot and he had a problem.
Yeah, there you go.
We're gonna tie those two things together.
I think.
So I've never watched this show, but there was apparently something like Mad Men. Didn't they have something like the main character that John Hamm played? That there was something like he was DB Cooper or something like that.
Oh, did they go in that direction? I
thought there was something weird like that they did.
Because I got to the point, like, spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't watched Mad Men. I think I only saw the first few seasons, and I kept meaning to like catch up with it, and now I'm like so behind. Then I got so behind that it was too daunting. But I knew that he had stolen someone else's identity, right? During the war. But I didn't know that they went in that direction where wouldn't that be something? Yeah. Now I'm going to have to watch the rest of that show.
Yeah, Dan Draper was because what was DB Cooper? It was like 1971.
Yeah, it was something like
so.
That.
It's within that time. Well, that documentary is interesting because the thing about it is that it really looks at DB Cooper like he's a folk hero. He's very much like a Bonnie and Clyde, like that kind of like John Dillinger, like this motherfucker got away with it.
Well, I kind of feel like anybody, it's just kind of like, I'm not one of those people that, makes folk heroes out of criminals, but in another, context, I kind of feel like if you're just taking money from banks or something like that, and you're not just like, you're not murdering people, you're not stealing money from people that need it, and you get away with it. That's what I mean. So I feel like
do it, but
it's like, don't do it. But if somebody like that did that and got away with it, you're almost kind of like, you go, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think he got away with it though. Chances are, I'm going to tell you, he jumped on his way down. He hit trees, got really busted up, hung there in the trees for a while.
Shit, wouldn't that suck?
Cut himself down. Yeah. He hit the ground. He had broken legs or a broken leg. He couldn't walk out, maybe even a broken back. And he laid there on the ground dead. He couldn't go anywhere. Yeah. That's probably what happened. And his whole scene was only in a few meters square, him and the money. And over time, rain and the elements got to that. You won't find him.
Well, again, wasn't there the guy that said that he picked him up in a truck?
Yeah, that was, somebody did say that afterwards.
Could be,
like
could
took him
be.
to a diner or something.
But I said chances are what really happened is that the dude died because he got busted up on a bunch of trees. Now, everybody knew about the D.B. Cooper thing. There's always going to be a probability where somebody's lying. Oh, yeah, I saw the guy. Oh, no, it's me. I did it, you know. Right. But chances are dude didn't make it. Yeah. He did a night jump.
But not impossible. He could have made it.
Could be. He could. But chances are he did a night jump over a fucking forest, got busted up on the trees, and because he was so busted up, he couldn't walk out with that money, and he died there on the ground.
He's just like, well,
with a broken back or a couple of broken legs.
But you're kind of hoping that he got away. It's always kind of
he
like,
may have crawled, but he wouldn't have made it only a couple of miles. You know,
and
it's always kind of like I'm always kind of like into those big heist kind of things where somebody's real ballsy like that. That's why I'm fascinated by these big art heists and diamond heists and stuff. But they don't hurt anybody, but they just take a bunch of stuff that was insured or take a bunch of money that was insured, and then they got away with it. Like one of my favorite heists, I still want to do a show about this one of these days because I read a book about it a few years ago, was the big Antwerp diamond heist. Like they have a big, I guess in Antwerp, which is in Belgium, they have a big, like a diamond little, little fortress part in the middle of the city where there's all these diamond merchants and stuff. And this gang, they planned this shit. There was a whole bunch of them and they planned it for 2 years and they kind of like infiltrated. They got people to like work in some of the diamond places as like security guards. So they had people on the inside and they got away with, I think it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest jewel heists in history. Yeah. And as far as I know, most of them got away with it and they didn't find most of the jewels and stuff that they stole. They stole like a bunch of loose gems and stuff like that.
With D.B. Cooper, they found some of that money on the ground. Yeah, that's a bad sign, though. Yeah, that's a very bad sign.
Right.
Because had he lived, he'd have every one of those bills.
Of course, that guy's wife claims that he was there in that area, and she thinks that he dropped the money into the creek, and a few weeks later, that kid found it.
It just sounds fishy.
Well, it's weird because after that happened, because it was so publicized, they had a bunch of copycats. Right. And one of the guys that was a copycat, they thought it might have actually been D.B. Cooper because he did something pretty much exactly the same as what D.B. Cooper had done, but he got caught like within a day or two.
It's just very fishy. If you steal money, you're going to keep every one of them goddamn bills because you risked your life for it.
You would think.
Yeah. And you know what I mean? If you're healthy and you're skilled, and you got a bag full of money, you're going to walk out with that whole fucking bag. Okay?
I just can't leave it. I can't leave it there.
Goddamn bag. All right. That's what's really going to happen.
I'm just personally convinced that it was that guy. Like just from seeing it.
Like I said, it could have been. I kind of
die rich.
I think he was pretty okay.
Okay, well,
then I don't think. I think but it's like that's the thing about that documentary. It's like it's ambiguous.
You're dealing with a dude that he had skills, but he probably didn't have a pot to piss in. Yeah. He had a lot of balls,
right?
And he was trying to get his hands on some money. It was kind of like a score of a lifetime. He probably, if he had that much of a plan to do the jump and everything, he would have had a plan of what to do with that money. Okay.
Well, you would think that he would plan that out ahead of time. Like, how am I going
to spend this money?
Because anybody worth their salt would know, even back then, that they can track all the serial numbers. Yes. So if he's that he'd have some kind of plan.
If he's a military man that has the focus to do all this stuff, he has a focus to how to spend all that money and to launder it. Mm-hmm. So he probably has a whole plan. Chances are, just off the top of my head, chances are he died.
Yeah.
There's a possibility he could have lived, though. Yeah. But you have to show me a good candidate.
Right. Yeah, check that out.
Okay.
It's on HBO.
Oh, okay. Check that out. It came out like a few months ago.
Okay, so it's fairly new.
So as usual, I never get to everything that we want to talk about, but let's talk about some movies.
Okay.
Before we stop and go on to Patreon stuff.
Okay.
Jenny, you talked about Threads.
I did, yeah.
And I don't think Tom wanted to watch that one. Doesn't seem like.
Yeah, I watched that one on my own. I was very excited when Shudder added it because
it's definitely a horror movie, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. The thing about it, I had heard this was the first time I'd ever seen it, like when I was reviewing it for my show. And I was just kind of like, I had seen The Day After, which came out in 1983. And I remember a little bit about it, but I mostly remember the reaction that everybody had afterward, like the next day at school. Cause I guess I was only 11 or something.
Yeah. I was younger, but I remember it. I remember my parents watching this stuff when I was little and like it absolutely terrifying me.
It was, yeah. I remember it being really terrifying. And I remember being at school the next day. I think it was in 5th grade, if I'm remembering correctly. And I remember everybody talking about it the next day, like, oh my God, did you see that shit last night? Holy shit. It's like, what would happen? But then it's like scary, but I think the thing that was scarier, and the more I looked into it, I kept seeing Threads, which I guess you could call like the British equivalent of The Day After. And I kept seeing that coming up on everybody's scariest movie lists. And I said, oh, well, it's kind of like, it's a nuclear apocalypse, docudrama. And so I really, really wanted to see it. And then Shudder added it. And I think that Threads is a lot more effective because The Day After, even though I haven't seen it in many years, even though it was really scary and it was really realistic, and they really did try to, make it as realistic as possible to show what would really happen in the aftermath of a nuclear war, the fact that they had actors in it that I knew who they were, like it had like Steve Guttenberg was in it, who I knew from the Police Academy movies, like back then. Right. Jo Beth Williams was in it, and I'd seen her in Poltergeist, like just a year or two before. And it was just kind of like, so you knew that it wasn't real because you're like, oh, these are obviously actors. But what they did with Threads was that, since I didn't recognize any of the people. I guess some of the people that were in it had been in some British TV and stuff, but I didn't know who they were. So, right. And a lot of the actors that they got in it were just kind of random ass people. So I think that made it a lot more realistic because you could totally believe that these were just, just random civilians going through this kind of shit. Another thing that I liked too about Threads in particular was that they took great care to show what would happen, not just in the immediate aftermath of the nuclear war, but also like several years, like it skipped ahead like a bunch. It was just like, hey, here's like a year later, here's 10 years later, here's, the shit that the world has dissolved into. By that point, everybody's just gone feral at that point. Everyone's, all the kids that had grown up in the aftermath of it were all like brain damaged, and none of them could really talk anymore, and all this other kind of stuff. And so it was just, I watched it, I think it was like a weekend, and I watched it on Shudder finally. You really, really have to be in the mood to watch something like that because it was really, it's really soul crushing, honestly. Yeah. Yeah. They really did a good job of showing just how everything would just completely go to shit. And I really like the way it was really effective how they did kind of like microcosm, macrocosm. It's like, we're going to center the whole thing in Sheffield in England. We're going to have like a few families so you can, there's people you can relate to who, like I said, they weren't characters in the same way that, people from The Day After were, because you're like, hey, it's that actor, it's Jason Robards, it's, I know who that person is. Right. These people were they weren't even like characters. They were just random ass people. And seeing them go through this, seeing them go through this like horrible thing, and then seeing what happened to them subsequently. And I also liked too that, and I think I mentioned this on my review, that some of the people in the movie, like some of the characters, all this shit goes down, and then you don't ever find out what happened to them. It's just kind of like they disappeared, and they're like, nobody knows where they went. Well, because everything got blown up, and then, you know, people died of radiation sickness. There's like piles of rubble and everything, you know, the nuclear winter and all that other kind of shit. And it's like, well, we don't even know what happened to Ted. It's like, and he never shows up again in the movie. It's not like a 3-act structure. They did a really good job of doing it like a documentary, but it's still being a fictional movie.
And then
I was so bummed out, like at the end of it. It was such a bummer.
Oh yeah. It's
such a bummer.
That movie, like I've seen The Day After multiple times, but that movie and The Road are two that I'm like, okay, great movie, but I don't want to watch them again.
The Road was the one that was about the UV light, right?
Huh?
The Road, was it the one where the sun was boiling everybody?
No.
Okay.
I read the book, The Road, too.
Yeah,
and then I saw the
Cormac
movie.
McCarthy.
Yeah. Ooh, man, if you ever want to like just feel like killing yourself.
The Road is basically like I don't know what happens, like an asteroid strike or something. Like I don't know.
It's something like that.
And it's basically just like human beings have resorted to cannibalism. I mean, it actually has a really beautiful message in the movie.
I saw that was German, isn't it?
No,
it's Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah,
okay.
Viggo Mortensen was
Robert Duvall is actually in it.
Yeah,
a few other people.
Flick.
Guy Ritchie, I think is in it. So there's there. I mean, it actually has a very beautiful message, but it's just a brutal message. It's just a brutal movie to watch. But Threads is just kind of just like that.
It's just me. I just felt so.
Have you,
man? It's a heavy watch. I can see how if you grew up in the UK during the same period, like I said, in the 80s, when, you know, if you're a kid in the 80s, this kind of specter of nuclear annihilation was always kind of like in the, you know, it was in the atmosphere. It was kind of in the back of everyone's mind. And I think even when I was a kid, I remember thinking, well, that's going to happen one of these days. That's going to suck. You know what I mean?
I never believed it.
Well, you know, you didn't really believe that it was going to happen, but it was always kind of there, like in the culture, like it could happen. So, and the fact that you see it in the movie, particularly in Threads, where they don't really buy it either, even though they see like in the background, like on the news and stuff, all this like escalating shit. But I don't think you don't really believe it until it happens. And like their reactions, like when they actually see the nuclear warheads going off and they're like, holy shit, it actually happened. And then like what happens subsequently, it's just their disbelief is kind of one of the scariest things to me, like watching that movie.
I think the British have a darker, bleaker outlook on it because
they do,
especially because of World War I. Like World War I really affected the British psychologically.
Yeah.
And the French as well. But have you ever seen The War Game? Have you sat down and watched that?
No.
I haven't.
Threads is basically a remake of The War Game.
Yeah, because I guess they made that back in the 60s. And it was similar. It was like a docudrama. I haven't seen it, but I read about it. And then they made it for the BBC, I think. And the BBC were like, no, we can't show that. Even though they had commissioned it. They're like, hey, make something that
they refused to show it in 1960.
Yeah, they're like, no, we're not showing that. Yeah. But then in the 80s, they were like, man, we needed to make another thing like that. Cheer everyone up, you know? Or, you know, so they decided to make another one and then they did show it. And as far as I know, it was like even more horrific than the original thing that they made back in the 60s.
When they showed Threads, they actually showed Threads and they showed The War Game at the same time. So The War Game was produced in 1966 and it's basically like, it's a documentary.
Yeah.
And it has that same kind of format that Threads has. But they basically... the BBC would not show it. They refused to show it. And I think you can still find it on YouTube. I think it's still there.
Yeah, it's around there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they definitely, I mean, the British have always had more, I don't know. They definitely do have a lot more, I guess, like you said, a bleaker outlook, or I guess they're kind of more, I wouldn't say they're pessimistic necessarily, but I think they're just more realistic in the sense that they're just kind of like, well, everything's going to shit and this is how it's going to be. And they'll watch it. There's, you know, it doesn't, I don't think it upsets them the same way. That's why you know, The Day After, as horrific as that was, I feel like they still needed to have one, kind of famous Hollywood actors in it. And two, they had to have an ending that, you know, a lot of people died and stuff, but then at the end they're like, oh, you know, we're going to pull this all together, you know, it'll be fine. You know, humanity, we're going to, you know, hopeful. Whereas the British were like, man, fuck that. It's everything sucks. And it just got worse and worse as the movie went on.
like I had my own kind of like kinder trauma at that age, because I was like 7 years old and brutally fucking scared of nuclear war. Like I'm sure you guys can understand that. Like, we were the last generation that was kind of like scared of it.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think people really understand in 1983 just how close we could have come to it. So it's like those movies, you had Threads, Day After, Testament was another one.
Yeah.
That if you've seen, that just like emotionally wrenching.
Yeah.
You know,
it's funny about the 80s and all that nuclear war stuff. You know, I grew up in a military academy, you know, fucking Signal Hill, California. And as a kid, we read all those fucking books. We would read fucking Jane's Defense Weekly and shit. We were reading all that shit by the time we were fucking 12 and 13. And I wasn't scared at all, because I understood exactly what they were fucking doing. And there was a book that I read in 1993 called The Future of Warfare. And it was written by a guy who was an arms dealer, and he was like one of the top arms dealer in Jane's Defense, and he didn't give up nuclear secrets, but he did talk about a lot of stuff about the nuclear aspect. It was bogus. It was mostly hyperbole. See, this is the thing that was happening in the arms industry. The Soviet Union couldn't afford nuclear testing. And we knew that. They could build nuclear weapons, but they couldn't test the effects on them. KGB and a lot of the Soviet intelligence, what they would do is they would just read what we were saying about the effects, and they would put that in their manuals. And we knew that. So what the impetus was in the military and in the military industrial complex was to exaggerate how deadly nuclear warfare would be. And we knew that the Soviets would hear that, and they would incorporate that into their doctrine. Well, so they magnified everything by about 10 times.
Well, that's kind of a smart thing to do, because, right. Well, you didn't, I mean,
you wanted to make them not launch.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of the whole thing. It's like we want to make everything sound
much worse than it was.
Maybe worse than it would be in real life. I mean, like I said, it didn't happen, so they don't really know what the effects would be. But
a nuclear weapon can destroy a city, but destroying a city will not win a war. We used 2 nuclear weapons on Japanese cities, and within days, those were functioning cities again. All right. As you increased the megatonnage of a nuclear warhead, really, you had diminishing returns. The area of effect actually didn't get any bigger. So they found out that big nuclear warheads weren't effective. You wanted smaller ones you could actually use, destroyed a certain area. And all it was a substitute for a bombing campaign. You don't need B-17s and B-24s
to drop. It's more like a one and done.
It's just one and done, and that's it. And there's your shit.
I think they knew that like mutually assured destruction was really going to work. That like if you launch, we'll launch, and you know,
and nobody really wanted.
Everybody's going to die. Nobody's going to want that.
Here was the thing: you're dealing with the Soviet Union. It was a professional military, all right, and they were a civilization. They did not want the exchange.
No, they didn't.
They didn't want it, so you could trust them. There was no fucking danger.
Well, the thing was, the danger though, was that it could happen by accident.
That was what I was more worried about that.
So I mean, have any of you guys seen Fail Safe?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I know.
So like in 1983, there was literally an incident where the sun was coming up over the Great Plains where all the fucking missiles were.
Yeah.
And this guy, it came down to one dude.
Yeah.
In the complex that said, I think the computer is malfunctioning. It's reading the sun coming up, and the Americans are not launching their missiles at us. We need to wait and see what's going on.
Yeah, that one guy. I might have mentioned that on the Threads review. I can't remember the dude's name, but he's known as like the dude that saved the world because everyone else was like, "Oh my God, they've launched. We have to launch and return." It's like, no, I think it's
during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It came down to 3 dudes on a nuclear submarine. One of them that disagreed.
Yeah.
And actually, the movie Crimson Tide is based on that.
The Russian, you're talking about the Russian guys.
Yeah.
Right.
You're talking about the Russians, right?
The Russian guys, yeah.
Yeah, the Russian guy said, I ain't launching. Yeah.
Yeah. So it literally came down to those, to the decision of an individual.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about this kind of stuff. It always comes down to individuals. It's not computers. It's not fucking people in command. It's always guys at the battlefield level, and they tend to be reasonable, and they're like, I don't have proof that this shit's going on. I ain't going to launch.
Well, especially something of that magnitude.
Right. And chances are, had there ever been an accidental exchange, it would have been very limited.
Hopefully, yeah.
It would have been something on the periphery between military bases and installations that would have been very limited, and then they would have backed off. Both sides would have backed off. It's not the Soviets were very trustworthy when it came to doing rational things. They weren't terrorists.
Well, and they didn't want their shit blown up.
Let me ask you this, Tom. The Soviets are trustworthy. Are the Russians? We're talking about 2 different things here.
Yeah.
People don't understand that.
Yeah.
Are the Russians now trustworthy?
Yeah. I would say more so than the Soviets. Yeah. The ones you can't trust are the Chinese. I would never trust them. No.
But like I said, the thing about it is that anything of that magnitude, you would think that most people would be like, we better make 200% sure before we do this shit.
You have to understand something. The Russians are being demonized. They're being demonized by U.S. media outlets because the people that own the U.S. media outlets are Chinese. China owns the U.S. media outlets. And the Chinese and the Russians do not get along. They do not want a U.S.-Russia alliance. Okay? The United States right now is China's bitch. And we've been China's bitch for about a decade. All right. They own our ruling class. Our ruling class is invested in China. Our ruling class wants the Chinese model. That's why you're seeing Maoist-style revolutions right now. And they're not to build a new thing. It's just to destroy old things because we're in a post-America era. This is not coming back. China's got this.
Well,
yeah, I believe so.
I do I find that interesting, Tom.
Yeah. Wait and see.
Well, that's all any of us can do.
They've been talking about this for a decade.
How shit's gonna shake out.
Yeah. They've been talking about this shit for a decade.
Let's talk about briefly before we close the main section of the show. Let's talk about Apocalypse Now.
Right.
Oh my God, Tom loved this movie.
I
love this movie so much.
Okay, so I am doing for a former producer, Rob, who used to be on this show. I'm doing been teaching his girls American history because of COVID. They've been out of school and stuff, and I actually have them watching this movie. Hopefully, they're watching it this week. I watched it, so because of that, I watched it again recently, and it still really stands up.
Oh
yeah, big time.
Yeah,
I mean, I've seen it probably like a billion times at this point.
Well, have you seen it? Have you seen Jeremiah Johnson?
I've never actually sat down and watched Jeremiah Johnson.
That's also John Milius. See Jeremiah Johnson?
He's a John Milius.
Right. I'm a John Milius fucking fan.
Fanboy.
All right. Me and John are like this, bro.
He stands John.
Yeah, me and John are like this.
It's weird because
we speak the exact goddamn same language. All right. You also want to see Conan, the first Conan.
I've seen the first Conan. I've seen that a couple of times.
The thing about Apocalypse Now, I saw it several times when I was growing up. I had never seen the extended director's cut with all that's like
the Redux.
The Redux, that's what we watched for the review. And a lot of some people complain. It's like, oh, this scene didn't need to be in there. That I don't hang with that. I think everything that was in there
is good.
I like that they put all that back in there. Like
it explains the whole narrative of the whole lesson is explained in the Redux.
Well, it's interesting because I've seen the Redux. I actually went to see that in the theater when it came out.
Yeah.
And it felt like you were in there forever.
You are.
Yeah. It's long.
I think that it's interesting that they put the French experience in there because that was
the main thing.
That's a part of Vietnam that people don't really understand. Yeah. But having watched the original theatrical cut, I honestly think that it's a much more powerful movie because of the lack of women in it.
Yeah, it could be. I was gonna say too, if you liked that part of Apocalypse Now that had the French in there, there was a movie that came out. I can't remember who directed it. It was called Indochine, and Catherine Deneuve was in it. It might have been a French movie, and it kind of goes into that time period of history and stuff too, because I think that's a part that doesn't get, because I think that was when they did the Redux. I think that was the part that most people complained about. It's like, why is that even in there? Like, it seemed like it interrupted the narrative, like all these people just sitting around the table or whatever. But I think that was kind of a significant, I don't know. I just feel like that's something that a lot of people didn't know about the Vietnam War. It's kind of like an underappreciated sort of aspect of that whole era of history.
Yeah, it's not only that, it's also the part in the Redux version where they encounter the Playboy bunnies.
Yeah.
Okay. And watching the theatrical version, which is the one that I watched just recently, I just kept thinking to myself, this thing is all about male dysfunction.
It is kind of in a lot of ways.
It works. It works that it's all males and that women aren't really involved in the story at all. It's a very strange kind of it just works in that way, that you just go, and as you're going deeper into this madness, you're going deeper into this just serious male dysfunction, and I think it works better.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And I've watched a couple of I saw a couple of really good video essays on YouTube where they were like analyzing both versions of the movie and kind of explaining why this is in there and why that's in there. And a couple of them said that it was just kind of like this journey. I mean, the journey down the river, the journey into madness and everything like that. Right. And just kind of as the men just get more fucked up and crazy at the end. And then it's just kind of like this battle at the end between these two. It's almost like he had to be the same as Colonel Kurtz to defeat him.
Yeah. There's no positive feminine influence at all.
Yeah.
It was Vietnam, bro.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
It was man's business. It didn't win. Right. But okay, look.
That's why it works so well in the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
Well, look, you watch the theatrical cut because it's more concise.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
If you see that first, that's great. If you still haven't really cracked the code of what Milius is trying to tell you, you then watch the Redux, and that'll help you, because there's more in there about Kilgore, Colonel Kilgore, who is also a very powerful symbol in the movie. And a lot of these like crackpot YouTube analysis, don't listen to those fuckers, man. They're totally wrong. They have no idea what they're talking about. You want to listen to Milius himself. Milius tells you what that story is about. All right. It is not an anti-war movie. It's pro-war. It's very pro-war. It's just that you're interpreting it in something that it isn't. And the dudes that worked on that were fucking ex-special forces guys. They were in the cast. They did a lot. They helped Milius a lot bring that back to life, to bring Vietnam alive. of what they were thinking and what the spirit behind that scene was. And it was a scene. Okay. I think the best story Milius told a story that I think best codifies what Apocalypse Now is. Okay. Milius said during this time, there were these hippies running around with these little peace signs, these little buttons, a little peace sign button, and it would say Nirvana Now. And what they meant is that you could take LSD and you could trip out and experience heaven without having to die. So you could be one of these little worthless fucking college kids tugging on his mama's apron strings with a few dollars in his pocket, and you could experience fulfillment in heaven just by taking a fucking couple hits of acid. Milius didn't like that shit at all. That has nothing to do with Buddhist philosophy, Nietzschean philosophy, or Schopenhauer. Nothing about personal development. That's just this corporate bullshit. Let's take some drugs. I'm fucking high. And now I'm a guru. All right. Now I'm a developed person. Bullshit. Milius would take those little buttons of a peace sign and he'd put jet engines on it and put little rings, little wings on the back of it and make it look like a B-52. And he wrote on the top of it, Apocalypse Now. All right. That the only way for development is through suffering. All right.
Well, that's kind of Milius's whole thing.
That's his whole thing. The crucible of suffering. All right. And overcoming obstacles to gain inner knowledge. All right. In other words, just like in Conan, you are forged on the anvil of Crom. All right. That's how you experience personal development. That's how you reach Valhalla. All right. None of this heaven shit's Valhalla. Okay. Now, when I die, I don't go to heaven. I go to fucking Valhalla. They told me that in basic training. Okay. Y'all don't go to Valhalla. You don't have enough kills under your belt. Okay. You have not enough miles on your boots. All right. You don't have it spit enough blood. All right. So that's what it is talking about. Willard is the poster child for PTSD.
Right.
All right. He's from the 173rd Airborne Division. He's working in MAXOG. He's an assassin. When you first see him, fucking MI shows up at his hotel and says, Colonel Willard, come with us. And he goes, what are the charges?
Right.
That's the first thing out of his mouth. What are the charges? Right. Oh, no, you're not being charged. Fucking the general wants to see you. Oh, okay.
We got some shit for you to do.
So
bro.
what kind of motherfucker, the first thing out of his mouth is, what are the charges? So you tell me, what kind of person is going to say that? Somebody who's done some bad shit, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he has done some bad shit.
Yeah.
And he's clearly having some problems
he
about
knows
it because
right.
he's like really fucked up at the beginning.
But he's addicted to it.
Yeah.
It's PTSD. All this shit about dudes that fucking kill other people, don't love it. They hate war. Bullshit. That was all written in World War I when you just sat in a trench and got shelled with lice on you. All right.
I know. I mean, you have vets now that like they want to go back.
Yes. Yes. It's an addictive substance.
Right.
Okay. All right. Hemingway says once a man has gone out and hunted other men, they don't have a taste for anything else. Okay. Because it's like the ultimate form of cocaine. That's why serial killers go back to kill these women. It is a rush for them.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing.
It's the same thing. It's just that
it's an adrenaline.
It's just that these dudes are like the predator. It's got to be an armed man. It's got to be an armed enemy man. That's what they're looking for. All right. So he goes back and he takes this mission to kill a rogue SF colonel. And they ask him, first off, what do you think of the SF? What do you think of the special forces? And he goes, yeah, they're great. You know, I saw that movie with John Wayne. Yeah, okay. And the reason why they're asking him that is they want to make sure there's no sympathy or no warrior worship or they're not idolizing the special forces because they're going to send a dude out to kill the special forces colonel. And if you looked at his fucking resume, his missions were working. All right. We're talking about Kurtz. Kurtz's missions actually worked. The Army's missions didn't work. Kurtz's missions worked because the Army's warfare is a civilized warfare. All right. How can you civilize warfare? It's not possible. And Kurtz himself says, you tell these pilots they cannot write fuck on the sides of their airplanes because it's uncivilized, but yet you tell them to drop fire on fucking little children. Okay?
Yeah, and he has that whole spiel where he talks about the inoculated arms, or they cut his
he
arms
said, if
off.
I had guys like that, our problems here would be in Vietnam would be over very quickly.
Tom, are you familiar with the Phoenix program?
No. Well, you might be able to tell me what it is, and I might remember. But
the Phoenix program was a CIA program in Vietnam where they basically, it was pretty much just like what Colonel Kurtz was doing. I mean, it was just like terrorizing the local population.
Yeah.
And they would do weird things where they would play these things off of loudspeakers where it was like the ghost of a dead Viet Cong soldier saying that he was in hell. It was basically like psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there seems to be a little bit of an illusion in Apocalypse Now to some of that.
Yeah. Well,
like what he's saying Kurtz is doing. When
Kurtz died, he said the horror.
The horror.
The horror. Right. Well, basically what works in actual warfare is not terrorism, it's horrorism. All right. Just ask the Mexican drug cartels. They own Mexico. All right. Yeah. Their elected fucking leaders fucking actually have their own cartels and give money to the cartel and if you want something done in Mexico, you have to have the cartels on you. Why? Because they will boil people alive in pots. They will boil judges alive in pots and pour them out on the courtroom steps. And once you understand the power of horror, you can have anything you want. All right. And that's what they're talking about. That's what Milius is talking about in Apocalypse Now. The horror. You cannot civilize warfare. It's tribal. The army in Vietnam is just like the army in Afghanistan and Iraq. They want a forever war that's never resolved, that will run forever, that people can tolerate because they're making money off of fucking contracts. It's not war. It just isn't. It's a deal. That's
and I think you got out like right at the edge of that, right?
Yeah. But my unit, 1st 327th, also known as Tiger Force, was involved in all this horrorism.
Yeah, I think they were part of probably Operation Phoenix.
Yeah. So, well, it was all classified. We didn't know about it during the time I was in. I found out about it recently once it was all declassified.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff.
Which it made a lot of sense once they declassified it. Of course. Because they already had us primed to do that kind of stuff.
You know, of course, Apocalypse Now is based on Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad.
Yeah.
But have you guys ever watched Aguirre, Wrath of God?
I have. You know what? I've been meaning to get around to watching that, actually. I don't think I've seen it, though.
Yeah. Klaus Kinski, Werner Herzog. I mean, Coppola based Apocalypse Now a lot on that movie.
Yeah.
Because in that movie, Klaus Kinski plays this Spanish conquistador that as he goes further down this river, he becomes more and more insane.
Yeah.
And it's basically Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. Apocalypse Now is a very artistic movie that spiritually is correct. All right. That is spiritually, that's what warfare is. But if you want to know what it's like actually more on the ground for an actual guy doing this, you want to see a movie about another unit that was in my division. It was about the 187th. It was a movie, 187th of fucking Rakkasans out of the 101st Airborne Division. And the name of the movie is called Hamburger Hill.
Okay.
Hamburger Hill and it's kind of a forgotten movie, but that's more accurate. That's more realistic. It would have been like that. And the shit, the way they talked and everything is exactly the way we talked. It's the same kind of vibe. And because I remember seeing all those when I was in service, and everybody during the time I was in was like, Hamburger Hill's the best one. That's the closest one.
Like the most accurate.
That's the accurate one.
Well, right. Tom, you would have had, when you were there, you would have had older guys that were in Vietnam. Right?
Yes. Dude, I had squad leaders that were Contras. Contra rebels from School of America.
That's a lot of them. That's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of my squad in my platoon, we had 4 Contras. They came out of School of America, and they were all evacuated from that shit that was going on. Was at El Salvador, and they were all American.
Yeah.
Contra went fucking bizarre too. They were like cutting people's heads off in the field, and they were all fucking killers.
Jesus.
But the Contras were badasses. They were good people. They were trying to fight the Sandinistas. They were anti-communists, and they were horrorists. They weren't terrorists. They were fucking horrorists. They did all that shit.
God.
But best one was Galarza. Sergeant Galarza. He was the shit, man, and he was a fucking Contra. And he had killed a couple dozen people, most of them civilian.
Man.
Yeah. Well, you have to kill civilians.
That's
how you get it done.
That's some rough shit.
Well, the civilians are ones that are doing all the shit. The civilians control the military. So you have to go for the civilians that are commanding the military. You got to make them pay for the shit that they do. And it's shit like Dennis Rader does. They come in through your window and butcher you and your family while you're asleep. Take pictures of it.
Do the impression, Tom.
What's that? Well, it's just combat, Sometimes it's got to be done. Yeah.
All right. I think on that note, guys, I think this is a good place to end this. We're going to do a little Patreon segment on the Free State of Jones, because Tom has personal experience.
I grew up in the Free State of Jones.
grew up in the Free State of Jones.
Yeah, my ancestors were in the Free State of Jones.
Jenny, please tell everybody where they can find 13 O'Clock Podcast.
Probably easiest place, just go to YouTube and search 13 O'Clock Podcast. We should pop right up. Or we also have a blog, 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and I post all the shows there. There's something for everybody. True crime, paranormal, horror movies, horror books, cooking, maybe music. We might get into doing that too.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah.
All kinds of stuff.
I'm looking forward to the goth music reviews from you guys. So.
Yeah, we were just talking about that a few days ago, so we might start doing that one of these days.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. And guys, can't recommend these guys enough. I really enjoy their show. Strange Realities Conference. Jenny was a part of that last year. Those are up and on sale. You guys can find that linked up there, and also patreon.com/Conspirinormal. If you guys want to support the show, that is there as well. Thank you so much, guys, and we will be back next time on Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal, or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.